What if one day you saw yourself standing across the room? Same face. Same eyes. Same voice. But something felt wrong. People say a doppelgänger is just a coincidence, someone who looks like you by chance. But for centuries, stories have warned us about doubles. Seeing your own double is said to be a sign of death, madness, or something far darker. Tonight, you will hear 4 deeply disturbing encounters. Each one feels real. Each one feels possible. And by the end, you may start looking twice at reflections, just to make sure they are really yours. Daniel was a quiet man in his early 30s, living alone in an old apartment building on the outskirts of the city. He worked long hours in a small office downtown and often returned home well past midnight. The apartment building had a reputation among the tenants for being old, cramped, and dimly lit. Its long hallways echoed with every footstep, and the flickering fluorescent lights gave it a disorienting, almost eerie quality. Daniel never paid much attention to it, until that one night changed everything. It was past midnight when Daniel stepped out of the elevator. The hallway stretched ahead, narrow and dark, illuminated only by a single flickering light in the middle. As he began walking, his eyes adjusted, and he noticed a figure standing at the far end. At first, he assumed it was just another resident returning home, but the figure's stance made him uneasy. It mirrored his own posture, slightly slouched, hands by the side, head tilted just a little. As he got closer, the blood drained from his face. The figure was wearing the exact same clothes he had on, black jacket, gray shirt, worn shoes. But it wasn't just the clothes. The man slowly lifted his head, and Daniel's stomach dropped. He was staring at his own face. Every detail was identical, the scar near the eyebrow, the tired eyes, the uneven smile. It was as if a mirror had come to life, staring back at him from the other end of the hallway. Daniel tried to speak, but no sound came out. His pulse raced, and cold sweat ran down his back. The figure smiled, wider than a normal human smile, and began walking slowly toward him. Every step echoed unnaturally in the silent hallway. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. The double reached the middle of the hallway, and with a calm, deliberate motion, it turned and started moving toward the stairwell at the end. Against every instinct, Daniel followed, drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity. When he reached the landing, the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The following days were a blur of paranoia. Daniel's neighbors began greeting him about things he didn't remember doing. One woman thanked him for helping with groceries the previous night. Daniel insisted he hadn't left his apartment. Another neighbor swore he had been knocking on the door at 3 in the morning. Daniel's unease grew into full-blown terror. Something was not right, and he was starting to feel like he wasn't even the same person anymore. Then came the footsteps. Late at night, slow, familiar footsteps echoed outside his door. Daniel gripped a flashlight and opened the door, but the hallway was empty. Yet the footsteps continued, approaching, stopping right in front of his apartment. The lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, Daniel felt a presence beside him, heavy and suffocating. Then, a voice, his own voice, whispered softly, chilling him to the bone, "You shouldn't have followed me." The lights came back on. The hallway was empty again, silent. Daniel didn't wait another second. He packed his belongings frantically and left the apartment building forever. Even years later, he could hear those footsteps at night, walking with the same rhythm as his own, echoing in hallways he no longer lived in. He never spoke of it, but deep down, he knew the truth. Something that looked exactly like him had been there, and it had followed him home. That night changed Daniel forever. Shadows seemed to linger longer, reflections appeared off-kilter, and every time he saw a stranger with familiar features, his heart skipped a beat. He learned the hard way that sometimes, seeing yourself isn't just coincidence, it's a warning. And some reflections are better left unseen. Maria was a 28-year-old night nurse working at a private care home, an old building with long hallways, high ceilings, and mirrors placed at every turn. During the day, she barely noticed them. But at night, something about the reflections always felt off, almost alive. One night, after finishing paperwork, Maria was washing her hands in the bathroom. She glanced up at the mirror, and froze. Her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. Her brow furrowed as she leaned closer. The reflection's smile widened unnaturally. The eyes, normally warm and tired, now glinted with something dark. And then it whispered her name. Maria, the reflection said in her own voice, soft but chilling. Maria stumbled back, heart pounding. She blinked, hoping it was stress or fatigue. When she looked again, her reflection was normal. Relief was brief. Over the next few nights, the sightings grew bolder. Mirrors, windows, even shiny surfaces like the metal handles on doors seemed to reflect something that wasn't quite her. A shadow moved differently, a smile lingered when it shouldn't. Maria began avoiding mirrors altogether, taking alternate routes down the hall, and checking reflections obsessively. One evening, she went to check on Mr. Thompson, a bedridden patient. She opened the door, and froze. Her double sat beside the bed, gently holding the patient's hand. The patient looked calm, even comforted. Maria wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. Her double turned slowly and whispered, "Go home. I'll take care of this." Maria bolted. She didn't stop until she reached her apartment. Sleep was impossible. The next morning, she called in sick, claiming exhaustion. But she knew it wasn't fatigue, it was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Days later, she returned to the building briefly and glimpsed herself, or her double, in a window, smiling when she wasn't. The sight made her stomach churn. She resigned immediately and never went back. Months later, she learned that the patient she had seen that night had passed away peacefully. Staff members insisted Maria had been present until the end, though she had no memory of being in the room. Something had taken her place. Something that looked exactly like her. Even today, Maria avoids reflective surfaces whenever possible. She sometimes catches a glimpse. Thomas and his wife, Claire, lived a peaceful suburban life with their 6-year-old son, Liam. The small, 2-story house on a quiet street seemed perfect. Liam was an only child, energetic and cheerful, with a vivid imagination. Or at least, that's what Thomas and Claire believed, until one evening shattered their sense of reality. It started subtly. One evening, Thomas heard the sound of running footsteps upstairs. He called out, "Liam, are you up there?" "Yeah, Daddy," came the cheerful reply. But then another voice echoed almost immediately, the exact same tone, "I'm here too, Daddy." Thomas froze, a chill running down his spine. Two voices. Liam was an only child. He hurried upstairs and pushed open the door to Liam's room. There, standing side by side in identical pajamas, were two boys. Each one had Liam's exact face, same messy hair, same bright eyes, same mischievous smile. One waved happily at him, the other stood silently, expressionless. Who are you?" Thomas whispered, his voice shaking. The smiling boy answered cheerfully, but the other simply stared, unmoving, like a shadow of his son. Thomas blinked, and when he opened his eyes, the silent boy was gone. From that night onward, things escalated. Liam began talking to someone invisible, blaming broken toys on his brother. He would occasionally glance toward empty corners of the room and giggle, saying, "He said I could do it." Thomas and Claire tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Liam was just acting out, inventing an imaginary friend. But one night, Thomas heard soft whispering from Liam's room after everyone had gone to bed. The words were unintelligible, but there was a strange rhythm, like two people speaking simultaneously. He opened the door cautiously and froze. On the bed, two shadows sat side by side. One was Liam, the other was the same size, same shape, but with a darker aura, eyes empty and still. The figure seemed to be whispering to Liam, and Liam nodded in response. "Daddy, why can't you see him?" Liam asked innocently, as if nothing were wrong. Thomas's heart pounded. He grabbed Liam and ran out of the room. That night, they stayed at a neighbor's house. The following day, they began searching for explanations, psychologists, therapists, even spiritual advisors, but no one had a solution. Liam insisted he wasn't alone, that his brother had been with him all along. Weeks later, the family moved to another town, hoping to leave the experience behind. Liam never mentioned the dark figure again, or so Thomas thought. Occasionally, Liam would ask cryptically, "When can I see my brother again?" Thomas and Claire were left with lingering fear and confusion. Something had existed alongside their son, something that looked exactly like him, and Thomas couldn't help but wonder, was it an evil doppelganger, or something that was meant to replace their child entirely? Even years later, the memory of that silent, staring boy haunts Thomas. Sometimes, when Liam plays outside in the yard, Thomas swears he sees movement at the window, subtle and familiar, as if someone is watching, someone with Liam's face but not his soul. Ethan had always been skeptical of urban legends and stories about doppelgangers. The idea that a person could have an exact double roaming the world seemed absurd. He believed in science, in logic, in evidence. But one evening, his beliefs would be put to the ultimate test. It began innocuously enough. Ethan was walking home from work, a quiet route along an empty street, when he noticed someone standing across the road. He paused, squinting in the dim streetlight. The figure looked eerily familiar. As Ethan stepped closer, his heart skipped a beat. The man was identical to him, same face, same posture, same clothing. Ethan froze, disbelief and fear colliding in his chest. The double's eyes locked with Ethan tried to speak. But the voice that came out was not his own. It was slightly off, unfamiliar. He looked around frantically, and then he realized something horrifying: someone else was living his life. The hospital staff, friends, and family were interacting with a version of him that wasn't him. It was as if the world accepted the imposter and rejected the real Ethan. Days passed, and Ethan attempted to prove his identity, to reclaim his life. Every document, every photograph, every piece of technology seemed to confirm the double's existence. His own memories were dismissed as confusion or trauma. Friends and family were polite but distant, as if they couldn't fully see him. The imposter was thriving in Ethan's life, slowly erasing his existence. Ethan realized that the encounter with his double on the street wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. Too late now meant his life, as he knew it, had already been claimed. Somewhere out there, the doppelganger had assumed his identity, while he was trapped in the margins, invisible to everyone who mattered. In desperation, Ethan sought out every piece of information on doppelgangers he could find. He discovered accounts of others who had been replaced, who had seen themselves in the world acting in their stead. Legend said the doppelganger was a harbinger, a replacement, a being that could seamlessly step into one's life while leaving the original behind. Ethan's sense of reality began to fray. Nights became torturous. Every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even polished metal, reminded him of what he had lost. He would glimpse the double's face in fleeting moments, smiling, thriving, while he remained a ghost, forgotten and powerless. He tried to warn others, but who would believe him? The world only recognized the imposter, the one who looked like him, spoke like him, and moved through his life effortlessly. Ethan learned the terrifying truth: sometimes, the real danger isn't an external threat. It's losing your place in the world to something that wears your face and steals your life. Even now, Ethan wanders the city streets at night, cautious and alert, knowing that somewhere, someone is living as him. And he knows, deep down, that if he ever sees that face again, it might be the final encounter, a permanent replacement. The warning from that first night echoes endlessly in his mind: too late now.